Hi, and welcome to a new episode of Drawing Talks, where we're focusing today on the U-boat. Yep, what is a U-boat? Is it a boat, John? Well, a little bit. It's a boat, but actually a submarine. It was used by Nazi Germany to try and cut the throat of Great Britain. And when I say cut the throat, I actually mean it. So what kept Britain in the war still was, well, essentially resources coming from America and Canada over the Atlantic. Without those, there's no way Great Britain could carry on. It's a small island nation with only so many resources. Great Britain obviously is well known for being an empire, and most of the things that they consumed came from the empire, came from abroad. There wasn't enough farmland and resources to be able to function as a country, so most of it had to be imported. And Hitler knew about this. Actually, everyone knew about this, and so the most efficient way to knocking out a country rather than completely destroying it is cutting off its supplies, and that's exactly what Nazi Germany tried to do. And when I say tried, they almost did. This weapon of war was perhaps the most destructive weapon of war to Great Britain at that time. Even Churchill even stated that's one of the few things that kept him up at night, was these lurking wolf packs underneath the water of the Atlantic Ocean, knocking out merchant vessels which contained all the things Great Britain needed to survive. So what they tried to devise was a convoy system. So the British came up with the idea of, rather than just individual ships just going out to sea and then being found and sunk, they actually escorted them in convoys surrounded by battleships and cruisers, and they would basically, in a way, be cannon fodder. They would try and seek out these U-boats, trying to attack these vessels full of all the things that we needed to live, and they would actually try and throw depth charges, which were essentially great big explosive barrels which they threw over the side, sank to a certain depth, and then blew up, trying to, well, blow up the U-boat. So successful were the U-boats in destroying these convoys, it turned out to be almost 3,000 ships. 3,000 ships were destroyed by U-boats during the war. It's a huge number. Usually a lot of historians would actually estimate it by tonnage, like how many tons were sunk, but I always find numbers which we can all understand and get our head around. We all know what a ship looks like, but imagine almost 3,000 ships being sunk to the bottom of the Atlantic and even the English Channel. So that's what they did. They just roamed around the Atlantic looking for prey. However, they were not impervious from being destroyed themselves, and there was a huge casualty list for what essentially were very, very brave men in a tin can, around about, I don't know, 40 odd, 44, 45, around about in the mid-40s, 44 members of the crew. Finally got there, didn't I? Around about 44 members of the crew, and all of them were very young. You'd find that actually a lot of them were in their early 20s. I think even a captain, there was like a what they called an ace, just like in World War One. Like, you know, you've got your ace fighter pilots, like the Top Gun, the Tom Cruises of the World War One and World War Two era. Yeah, they used to call these captain aces, and they were celebrities. By the time they got back to port, displaying pendants showing how many ships they sunk, they were like paraded around as heroes, and quite rightly they were, for their countrymen, because they went out there risking their lives, trying to sink all this shipping. Okay, let's get down to numbers. When I say a lot of how dangerous it was estimated around about 60% of all U-boats that went out to sea were destroyed. 60%. It was huge. In fact, it was estimated that in World War II, that was the most highest loss for any military unit during the entire World War II. It was an incredible amount. And so, however, it was all terrible. It was terrible to be on a ship. It was terrible to be in a U-boat, and and everyone, there was a lot of sacrifices made. So with this particular example, which I'm drawing here, is the con tower. I think it's called a con tower anyway. I'm an artist, not a historian, but I would like to say I'm a armchair historian. If I am wrong, please leave comments below. But this is a tower. So as you've got a cylindrical tube, if you can imagine a cigar, and on top, in the middle of it, you've got a tower, and that's exactly where the captain would be on top. And when they were on the surface of the sea, it would peer out, having a smoke, as you can see here, and they'll be looking out for shipping. Because even though these were submarines who went underwater, most of their time they were above water, and they don't really go underwater if they were after prey. Because after all, would you like to be thousands or hundreds of, not thousands of feet under the water, with lots of stinking men? You really wouldn't, who rarely had baths or showers. Actually, no baths or showers, pretty much. The most they could hope for was a little bit of rinse with seawater. So it was a terrible time for all those involved. So as much as these were the scourge of Great Britain, you have to have a lot of respect for people of any nation to be in such vessels under the water doing what they're told. In fact, I recommend, there is a movie called Das Boot, which is obviously German for the boat, if any of you know German, but I think you can make that out from Das Boot. It's around about 3 hours, I think 3 to 4 hours, this film. But it's said to be one of the best war movies out in regards to World War II, and it's all in German, and I think it's made by Germans. So yeah, it's got subtitles, but trust me, if you start watching this, you forget about the subtitles, as you would do with any other really cool TV show nowadays. And it's a real eye opener to see what these young men had to go through and sacrifice themselves for such an awful regime. After all, there's not much little choice, really, is there? So yeah, that's the con tower as well. Con tower would actually have the aerial sticking out, which I'm having to constantly source. So if you see me going back and forth to the internet and those pictures, with any artist, you need to use source. I wouldn't say this is 100% accurate, but it gives you enough information to let you know that this is a U-boat con tower. I greatly enjoyed drawing this because it was a mixture of machinery and people. As you can see, they're pretty clean, but in real life they would have been covered in oil. As I said, they would have smelt, they would have had beards as well. When it comes to discipline on these U-boats, every man did their duty, but it was a little bit more relaxed because after all, you couldn't look your best on the boat, months at a time at sea, refueling at sea, getting their materials at sea, and then rarely going home. And so pretty much like they grew beards. If you go on Google and look at images of U-boat Kriegsmarines, I think they call them. They're sailors. They literally would have beards and kind of be grubby looking unless they were out on parade. Of course, every country at the time had its own U-boat type vessel, like submarines. So America, Britain, but this one, the Nazi Germany's U-boats were pretty famous during World War II. But yeah, that was it. So as you can see on that particular drawing I've done, on the side there's a picture of like what was a swordfish, because ultimately these vessels were their homes and they treated them like their homes. These things took them out to war and hopefully brought them back, and so they would adorn these ships with graffiti, you could say. And again, always a blind eye was turned because of such a great job that they were doing. Anyway, so that was about it with this part of the picture of the U-boat. I hope you enjoyed it. It took me a long time to do, so forgive me if this video is a bit long. And yeah, take care, keep on drawing and be inspired.